Amara sat quietly in the cafe, her fingertips resting on the rim of a still full cup. A ring of warm milk clung to the porcelain edge, untouched. Not because the drink had gone cold, but because her thoughts had filled the space where appetite used to be. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, laying a soft golden stripe across the floor. Outside, the city moved, brisk, busy, unaware that inside, a woman sat face to face with the version of herself she had once left behind. Elliot was 7 minutes late, still punctual enough to seem polite, still late enough to remind her that he never truly rushed for anyone. When he walked in, he looked the same, tailored, neat, commanding in that quiet way of wealthy men who assume the world will make room for them. His eyes found her in seconds. No hesitation. He walked over and nodded once. "Amara?" She didn't speak. Just tilted her head slightly in greeting, not out of pride, but because some wounds speak better in silence. He studied her. "You've changed," he said. She let out a soft laugh, not bitter, not warm either. Just real. "I've slept on concrete," she said. "People change when there's no one left to catch them." He didn't argue, just took a slow breath like he was about to say something, then let it fade. "I didn't come to reopen the past," he said. "The board is meeting in 2 weeks. They want clarity about Noah, about you." Her voice was steady. "I'm not asking for anything." "I know," he said. She looked at him, really looked. "I didn't ask when you turned your back. I didn't ask when I gave birth alone." There was a flicker in his eyes, a pause, a shadow of something like regret, but it passed quickly. He leaned forward. "What do you want then?" Amara's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't come to ask, I came to choose." And just like that, something shifted, not in him, in her. Because once she would have waited for his approval. Now she barely waited for his understanding. He blinked. "The board wants peace. If you're willing to step back, we can negotiate something clean, quiet." She tilted her head. "You chose what was quiet for you. I chose what was loud for me. The difference is, I survived mine." He didn't answer. She stood, wrapped her scarf tighter, adjusted the sleeve of her coat. "I have to go. My son's school lets out soon." And just before she reached the door, she paused. Didn't turn. Just let her words hang in the air behind her. "This time, I won't sit quietly while others decide who I'm allowed to be." Then she stepped into the light and left the past sitting at a table, watching her walk away. The office tower was cold in its beauty. Glass, marble, brushed metal, everything polished, everything calculated. The kind of place where people spoke in careful tones, wore silence like a suit, and measured worth in numbers far from human warmth. Amara stood in the lobby, the security badge clipped to her coat. Her name, printed neatly beneath her photo, looked official. But the girl behind it still remembered mopping floors in buildings like this. Now she was walking in, not as staff, as someone they had to let in. The elevator rose smoothly, no music, just soft mechanical hum. Her reflection followed her in the mirrored panel, composed, alert, steady. But deep inside, something twisted. Not fear, not doubt, memory. Because this was Elliot's world, his family's world, and now it was Noah's world too. The meeting wasn't until the next day. But her lawyer, Camille Waters, sharp as steel wrapped in velvet, had insisted she learn the terrain first. Empires aren't just built on money, Camille had told her. They're built on perception. Know what room you're walking into before they know how to box you in. Camille met her in the executive lounge. "You good?" she asked, handing her a thick folder. "I don't know what good means anymore," Amara said honestly. Camille gave a small smile. "It means you walk in anyway." They spent an hour reviewing names, shares, alliances. Amara listened carefully, her eyes never leaving the page. Every face on the chart had once been untouchable. Now they were players, and she wasn't the maid anymore. She was Noah's mother. And in this world, that meant something they both feared and needed. Camille paused near the end. "There's a split in the board. Some are pushing for Elliot to take full control. Others are curious about you. They think you bring a new face. A softened story, a headline they can control." Amara raised her eyes. "Control? Don't mistake attention for respect," Camille said softly. "They'll smile while weighing how to shape you into a mascot, or push you out completely." Amara closed the folder. She looked through the floor-to-ceiling window beside them, the skyline stretching far and wide, indifferent to who owned what. "I'm not here to be a symbol," she said. Camille nodded once. "Good." Because tomorrow, they're not expecting you to walk in like you already belong. Amara stood a little taller. She didn't know what the next meeting would bring. But this time she'd be ready. Not just to speak, but to be heard. It arrived folded, thick and cream-colored. The kind of paper that felt expensive before you even read what was inside. Amara found it in her mailbox the next morning, tucked between a utility bill and an ad for discounted groceries. She stood at the kitchen table with Noah humming in the next room, carefully breaking the gold seal with one thumb. Inside, a single sentence. You are formally invited to attend the Caldwell Enterprises board review session as the legal guardian of Mr. Noah Amari Caldwell. There was no warmth, no welcome, just permission. The kind written with power, not generosity. Amara stared at it. Not long. Just enough. Enough to remember every doorway she had once passed without being seen. Every hallway where her presence had been ignored. Now they had to make space for her. Because they wanted control of her son. Because they feared what she might become. Because the name she carried was no longer quiet. She set the invitation down. Took a breath. The room was still. Later that night, she found Mrs. Delaney folding laundry in the living room, her reading glasses perched on her head like always. I got it, Amara said simply. Delaney didn't ask what. She just looked up, eyes full of quiet knowing. They're not going to make it easy, she said. Amara nodded. I know. You don't need to impress them. I won't. Delaney folded another shirt, smoothed it once. You only need to walk in like the woman who raised that boy without a cent from them. That line landed like stone, not heavy but grounding. Amara thought of Noah, his drawings taped on the fridge, his sleepy voice whispering, Mommy, don't forget my snack. She thought of the years it took to grow roots in her own name. She wasn't stepping into that room to argue for her worth. She was walking in because she already knew it. And now, they would have to learn it too. It wasn't the kind of battle you trained for with fists. This one needed a spine that didn't shake when the room got cold. A voice that stayed steady when no one wanted to listen. And a memory sharp enough to remember every moment you were made to feel small, without letting that memory shrink you again. Camille arrived at 8 on the dot. Black blazer, minimal makeup, eyes like she'd already read every play before it was made. She laid out the agenda on Amara's kitchen table, which still had crayons and a juice box left from Noah's breakfast. A few board members are neutral, Camille said. A few hate you on sight, and 1 or 2 are starting to question Elliot. Amara listened. No nodding, just stillness. Camille tapped the folder. They'll test you, correct how you speak, refer to you as Miss Lewis while looking at each other. Don't flinch, don't soften your story. Amara folded her arms loosely. I don't want to turn this into a show. Camille looked up. It already is, but we choose what kind of story it becomes. That landed hard and true. They spent hours reviewing statements, financial control clauses, guardianship rights. Amara read everything twice, sometimes aloud, not to memorize, but to understand. Because if she was going to sit in that room, she wouldn't be the girl they once dismissed. She would be a woman who knew what she was saying. Later that night, after Camille had gone, Amara stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair back slowly. Not styling, just seeing. Seeing how far her face had come. How the softness had learned to sit beside steel. She whispered under her breath, not a prayer, just a truth. I'm not walking in to be tolerated. Then she glanced at the drawing Noah had left on the floor, a picture of her, with a crown made of stars and a cape that touched the ground. She smiled, not because it was sweet, but because her son had already seen the warrior in her, long before the board ever would. The boardroom was colder than she expected, not in temperature, but in tone. Everything was steel and silence. Long table, tall back chairs, polished floors that swallowed footsteps, and windows too wide to feel like comfort, more like warning. They were already seated when she arrived. 12 people, 10 suits, 1 pair of pearls. Elliot near the center, suit sharp, gaze unreadable. His mother at the far end, lips tight, hands folded with that same stillness Amara remembered from the day she was dismissed without a word. Camille walked beside her, quiet and firm, stopping just short of the table. Miss Lewis, the chairwoman nodded. Please have a seat. Amara nodded once, moved slowly, deliberately. She didn't rush, didn't shrink. Every chair creaked when someone shifted. Every glance felt measured, Some curious, some cold, a few blank by design. She could feel them taking inventory of her. Her clothes, her posture, her voice, even before she spoke. They didn't say it aloud, but it hung in the air like smoke. She used to clean rooms like this. Why is she here now? Elliot finally spoke. For transparency, we've asked Ms. Lewis to be present today regarding the status of Noah Caldwell's guardianship and potential implications for the future of Caldwell Enterprises. His voice was smooth, practiced. He didn't look at her. A man to his left adjusted his tie. We understand you raised the child alone. That's admirable. But we have to ask, do you really believe you're equipped to manage his interests in a structure this complex? Amara didn't flinch. She looked at him, not with defiance, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had been asked far worse by people with far less at stake. I didn't raise him in boardrooms, she said softly, but I raised him through winter nights with no heat and days when I wasn't sure I could feed him. I raised him with books instead of toys and truth instead of distractions. She paused. And I'm still raising him, every day. The room stilled. Someone at the end tapped a pen, then stopped. Elliot finally looked at her, not the way he had before. Not as the woman from his past, but as someone unexpected. Maybe even inconvenient. The oldest board member leaned forward, clearing his throat. I've seen shareholders inherit millions and waste them in months. I've seen fathers build empires and raise children who tear them down. He turned to look at Amara. I don't know you yet, but I know grit when I see it, and this board could use more of that. Elliot's mother stiffened, but no one spoke, not yet. Amara didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply folded her hands in front of her and met every gaze with steady calm. She wasn't here to take space. She was here to claim what her son had already earned. It started with a headline. From maid to mother of an empire, who is Amara Lewis really? At first, she didn't read the article. She saw it by accident, on someone's tablet on the train, half-glanced over a stranger's shoulder. Her own face, frozen mid-blink. A photo that wasn't even recent, blurry, harsh lighting, the kind you don't realize someone took. By noon, there were more. Blogs, opinion pieces, anonymous threads. They called her a social climber, a trap setter. Some asked where she was when Elliot got engaged. Others wondered if Noah was really his child at all, even after the DNA confirmation. One headline said, she had the baby, now she wants the business. Amara sat at the kitchen table that night, the screen glowing in the dark. Noah was asleep. His drawings lined the wall beside her, rockets, stars, and a new one, a lion in a cape. She scrolled in silence. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. But she did feel it, the slow tightening in her chest, that old, familiar weight. This wasn't just about her. They wanted to reduce her again, make her small, easier to ignore, easier to erase. She closed the laptop. Mrs. Delaney walked in, wrapped in her usual shawl, holding 2 mugs of tea. They're scared, she said gently, setting one down. Amara didn't look up. Of me? No, Delaney said. Of what it means if you don't break this time. That landed, because they didn't need her to fail loudly. They just needed her to fade quietly. And this campaign of whispers, pixels, and perfectly placed doubt, it was their way of painting her invisible again. But it wouldn't work. Not this time. Because she'd already lived through worse stories being told about her. In silence, in darkness, in places without headlines. She stood, picked up Noah's lion drawing, and pinned it higher on the wall, right at eye level. Let them whisper. She knew who she was. And soon, so would everyone else. It started with a feeling. Nothing loud, no footsteps, no drama, just a sense that someone's eyes were staying too long. Amara was waiting outside the school, standing near the far gate where most parents didn't gather. She liked it that way, quieter. Noah always ran to her, arms wide, face flushed from playing, but today she felt it. Someone watching. She turned slowly. Across the street, a man leaned against a light post, phone in hand, not raised, not obvious, but not taking pictures either. His eyes flicked toward her, then away. Too fast, too practiced. Amara looked down at her phone, pretended to scroll. Her breath tightened. When Noah came out, running, beaming, she smiled, but it didn't reach her chest. She took his hand and walked the long way home. That night, she stayed near the window long after the lights were out. Noah slept soundly. But she watched the street below. A car idled too long at the corner, then moved, then returned. She didn't panic. She didn't call anyone. She just stayed awake. Because this was how fear worked now. Not in loud threats, but in subtle reminders that she wasn't supposed to feel safe. The next morning, Camille called. "I got a tip," she said. "One of Elliot's PR advisors may have hired someone to document you." Amara didn't speak. "They're trying to build a case, imply instability, that Noah's in danger, that you're being overwhelmed." Amara looked at her son across the room. He was tying his shoelaces wrong again, tongue out, brow furrowed, determined. She walked over, kneeled down, fixed the laces, kissed his forehead, then looked up at Camille, voice calm. "Let them watch." Camille hesitated. "You're sure?" Amara nodded. "Let them see everything." She stood, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she'd already lived through the worst thing imaginable, being forgotten. Now they remembered her, and soon they'd wish they hadn't. The letter came by hand, not email, not certified post, just a thin envelope left on the counter of the bookstore with Amara's name written in soft, elegant script. No return address. She didn't open it right away. Something about the handwriting made her still, like it belonged to someone from another time. Someone who knew how to weigh words before speaking them. Later that night, when Noah had fallen asleep, she sat on the edge of the couch, unsealed the flap, and unfolded the single sheet inside. The message was short. "Miss Lewis, I would like to meet you. I believe your presence is not a threat to this company. It may be its only chance at dignity. G.D. Wallace." She paused. Paulus. The name echoed. One of the original board members, older, quieter. The kind of man who didn't speak much in the first meeting, but whose eyes said he was watching everything. The next day they met. A small private lounge at the top of a hotel, just before sunset. Warm wood walls, jazz playing low, 2 glasses of water set neatly on the table. He stood when she entered. Tall, gray hair, tired eyes. "Miss Lewis," he said gently. "Thank you for coming." Amara nodded. "You asked to see me." He motioned to the chair. "I've watched this company turn into something unrecognizable. Your son may inherit it one day. I'd like him to have something worth inheriting." She sat, eyes steady. "I'm not here to save their empire." "I know," he said, "but you may be the only one who won't burn it out of spite." He slid a document across the table. 37% of the board follows my vote. If I move my proxy shares, you'll have influence. Not ownership, but power. She stared at the page, didn't touch it. "Why now?" she asked. His voice softened. "I had a daughter once. She fell in love with someone like Elliot. It cost her everything. I wasn't brave enough to stand beside her then. I suppose I'm trying to do it now. For someone else's daughter." Silence settled. Not awkward, just honest. Amara folded her hands in her lap. "I won't be their puppet," she said quietly. "I wouldn't waste this on anyone who would." They didn't shake hands. They didn't make promises. But when she walked out, the city looked different. Not smaller, not larger, just open. And for the first time, it felt like the boardroom she was walking toward might not just belong to them. It was raining when he showed up. Not the kind of rain that screams against glass, but the quiet kind. The kind that whispers against windows, soft and steady, like the world is trying to confess something. Amara was in the bookstore, restocking the corner shelves where Noah's favorite stories lived. The bell over the door chimed once. She turned. Elliot stood there, soaked, umbrella closed at his side. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just waited. "I didn't know where else to go," he said quietly. "You knew where I was 5 years ago," she replied. "You just didn't come." His eyes dropped. The same eyes that once looked at her like she was a secret worth keeping, now clouded with something that looked like shame. "I didn't know how to fix it." "I didn't ask you to," she said. The silence between them stretched. He stepped further in carefully. Not like a man who felt entitled to the space, more like someone walking into a memory he didn't know how to carry anymore. "I'm not here for the company," he said. "Not the vote. Not the board." She raised an eyebrow. He took a breath. "I saw the pictures of Noah. I heard about the cameras. I didn't know they were doing that." She stayed silent. Elliot looked up again. "I'm not proud of the way I handled things. I hurt you. I was selfish, cowardly." Still, she didn't respond, because she'd waited years for those words. And now that they came, soft, slow, late, they didn't land the way he thought they would. They didn't melt anything inside her. They just settled. Like dust. "Why now?" she asked. He hesitated. Because I see what you've become, and I'm realizing maybe you were never the one who needed me. Amara's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. No, she said, I wasn't. Elliot looked down at the floor. He wasn't the man he used to be, or maybe he still was, just older, sadder, and starting to realize what he let go. I want to be in Noah's life, he said softly. Amara's voice stayed even. Then show him who you are now, not who you pretend to be for a boardroom. She turned back to the shelf. Her hands moved slowly, placing books in a neat row. Elliot lingered for a moment, then left. The door closed behind him with the same sound it always made, soft, final, gentle. And Amara stood there in the quiet, not angry, not wounded, just whole. Because some apologies aren't meant to fix the past. They're only meant to show how far you've come without them. They asked her to speak on a morning when the sky was clear. No storms, no clouds, just that quiet blue that almost dares you to be brave. The interview request had come from a journalist known for listening, not twisting. Camille had reviewed the questions. Mrs. Delaney had simply said, if you don't tell it, someone else will, and they won't get it right. So Amara agreed. Noah was at school. She wore a simple navy blouse and soft gold earrings, not to impress, but to feel steady. She sat in a chair opposite the camera, mic clipped to her collar, legs crossed at the ankle. The room was warm, the lights weren't harsh, and the woman across from her didn't rush the first question. Why now? She asked gently. Amara paused, looked down at her hands, then up again. Because I've lived too much of my life being spoken about, she said. This is me speaking for myself. The interview wasn't dramatic, no tears, no breaking down, just truth. Told slowly, told fully. She spoke of the affair, but not as a scandal, as a mistake made by someone who wanted to be loved. She spoke of the night she gave birth alone, her back aching, her voice hoarse from whispering comfort to herself. She spoke of hunger, of a baby wrapped in thrifted blankets, of sleeping under flickering lights in a borrowed room. She spoke of building, not in concrete but in small daily courage, in saying no when it would have been easier to disappear. And then she spoke of Noah, how he smiles in his sleep, how he says I love you, like it's something he's always known, how he once drew her as a lion with a crown and said, because you fight for me. Her voice caught just a little there, but she didn't cry. She smiled, soft, proud. When the interview aired, the reaction came in waves. Some people still doubted her. That was expected. But many others saw something familiar. Not a gold-digging headline, not a scandal, just a woman who never had a stage before, and now finally stood on her own feet, telling the story in her own voice. No edits, no filters, just the truth, and the world listened. The letter came folded in 3. Stamped. Formal. Heavy in tone before a single word was read. Camille read it first. Her face stayed calm, but Amara could see the shift, the stillness behind the eyes. The same stillness she'd seen in a nurse's face once, just before telling her there were no more rooms left. She handed the letter over wordlessly. Amara unfolded it. The words were sharp. Petition for review of guardianship and financial oversight, filed on behalf of Mrs. Clarice Caldwell, Elliot's mother. The same woman who had once stood at the top of the stairs and watched her be dismissed like a stain. Amara read slowly. Accusations of instability, of emotional bias, implied irresponsibility with funds, concerns about Noah's public exposure. The language was clean, but the intent behind it was surgical. They weren't asking questions. They were laying a foundation to take him. Camille spoke gently. They're not going after custody. That would never hold. This is about controlling the trust, his inheritance. They're trying to make you look unfit to manage his legacy. Amara folded the letter again, placed it carefully on the table. The same table where Noah once built towers out of juice boxes and whispered, "Don't knock it over, Mommy." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, she stood, walked into the other room. Noah was on the floor, coloring a dragon with 4 wings and a cape. She watched him for a few seconds, just breathing. Because this fight wasn't about headlines anymore. It wasn't about Elliot. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about her child. The boy she carried through silence. The boy she held while the world looked away. And now they wanted to decide, again, who she was allowed to be in his life. She walked back into the kitchen, voice steady. "Let them come," she said. Camille looked up. They think they're challenging a woman who made it here by accident. But what they don't know, Amara paused, her hands flat on the table, is that I bled to stand here. There was no fear in her voice, no trembling, just something stronger than either. Resolve. And outside the window, the rain had finally stopped. The courthouse smelled like paper and old floors. Not cold, not hostile, just heavy. The kind of place where words become weapons and silence becomes armor. Amara walked in with Camille by her side, dressed in charcoal gray, minimal jewelry, her hair pinned neatly. She didn't want to look rich, just ready. A few cameras waited outside, but she didn't stop for them. Inside, the courtroom was already half full. Elliot sat near the front. His mother sat beside her legal team, sharp in navy, her mouth drawn tight. She didn't glance over. Not once. Amara didn't need her to. This was no longer about her past with Elliot or even the headlines that had surfaced. This was about Noah and who would shape the world he grew up in. The judge entered. Voices settled, papers shuffled. Clarice Caldwell's attorney stood first. His tone was smooth, respectful, but laced with implication. He spoke of concern, of legacy, of the complexity of managing assets meant for a child destined to inherit a multi-generational empire. They used words like emotional strain, public image, and financial stewardship. Not once did they say Amara's name with warmth. Then Camille stood, and she said it plainly. This is a case about control. About whether a mother who raised her son without a dime of Caldwell wealth is somehow less capable now that the world knows who he belongs to. She paused. Let the words settle. Then Amara was called. She stood at the front, not shaking, not small, just present. They asked her to describe her life before the inheritance, before the board, before the headlines. She didn't dramatize. She told the truth. I worked. I survived. I raised my son with borrowed clothes, with bedtime stories when we couldn't afford toys. I taught him to say please and thank you and to look people in the eye. They asked if she understood the complexity of a trust fund. She nodded. I understand what it means to protect something valuable. I've done it since the day he was born. When they were done, she returned to her seat. Camille leaned over. You were perfect. Amara didn't smile, but in her chest there was calm. Not relief. Not yet. But the knowing that she had stood up, not as a symbol, not as a scandal, but as a mother who refused to be erased again. Outside, the day was overcast, still, waiting, like the future was just holding its breath. The ruling came 3 days later. Not in a dramatic announcement, no slamming of gavels, just a folded document slipped into Camille's hands at 8:42 a.m. on a quiet Thursday morning. The bookstore hadn't opened yet. Sunlight crept through the window like it was trying not to disturb anything. Amara stood at the counter, her hand wrapped around a warm cup of tea she hadn't touched. Camille looked up from the letter, her face unreadable. The kind of expression that holds both relief and restraint. Well? Amara asked. Camille stepped closer, set the document down between them. The judge is keeping everything as it is, she said. You retain full guardianship, legal and financial. Amara breathed out. Just once, softly. But, Camille continued, the court has ordered regular oversight for now. Quarterly reports, some shared transparency with the Caldwell attorneys. Checks and balances, Amara said quietly. More like a leash they're hoping you'll trip over. She nodded. It wasn't a clean win, but it was still hers. Clarice Caldwell had lost her opening move. The power play hadn't landed. And in the silence that followed, Amara heard something deeper than victory. Validation. Not because the court said she was capable, but because she had stood up to a machine meant to intimidate her, and hadn't flinched. That night, after dinner, Noah curled up beside her with a book. Half asleep, cheek pressed to her arm. Mommy, he mumbled, you know what my teacher said? What? She said, I'm brave. Amara kissed the top of his head. You are, she whispered. Then she looked out the window at the skyline in the distance, beautiful, rich, indifferent. Let them watch. Let them wait. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to last. And piece by piece, she was doing just that. It happened on a Tuesday. No drama. No press release. Just a quiet invitation slid across a desk in a private room lined with old oil paintings and newer insecurities. Amara had been called in by G.D. Wallace. Again. Same hotel lounge. Same table. But this time something was different in his posture. Less test. More respect. He didn't waste time. The board is shifting, he said, leaning forward, hands folded. They're tired of Elliot's image management, tired of Clarice's behind-the-scenes meddling. They're looking for someone with long-term vision, Amara listened, didn't lean in, didn't react. She had learned the power of letting others sit in their own silence. Wallace continued, I'd like to put your name forward for a formal advisory position. You'd have voting rights, oversight, real influence, nothing cosmetic. She raised an eyebrow. I thought I was just a distraction, she said. A quiet scandal, something to outlive. You were, he said simply. Now you're the most grounded thing in the room. The compliment didn't swell her ego. It didn't melt the years, but it settled in, like truth. She looked at the paper he slid across the table. A formal seat. A voice in the direction of an empire that once threw her out the back door without a name. Not because she begged for it, but because now they needed her. And it wasn't lost on her that what they feared most wasn't scandal. It was substance. Amara folded the paper, didn't sign it yet, just looked Wallace in the eye and said, If I take that seat, I won't sit quietly. Wallace nodded once. That's exactly why it should be yours. Later that evening, she sat in her apartment, Noah asleep in the next room. She looked at the skyline beyond the window, the one that used to make her feel small. Now it looked possible, not because it changed, but because she had. The boardroom was quiet when Amara walked in, but this time, the silence didn't feel like judgment. It felt like recognition. She wore soft gray, the same color as the sky on the day she gave birth, a quiet kind of power. Her steps were calm, her eyes clear. Elliot was there. He looked up, then looked down. Not out of shame, but out of understanding. Their war was over. The truth had already spoken louder than either of them ever could. Wallace stood. This seat is yours, if you're ready. Amara didn't hesitate. She took it. No grand speech, no applause, just the sound of her own chair sliding into place where she once never thought she'd be allowed to sit. She signed the document, initialed the margin, folded her hands, and just like that, the room shifted. Not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't need to anymore. Afterward, she walked out into the hallway, where Camille was waiting with that same small smile she always wore when things had gone exactly as planned. You did it, Camille said. No, Amara replied, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. We're just getting started. That evening back home, Noah was already in pajamas, feet swinging off the couch, drawing another superhero. This one had her hair. He looked up when she came in. How was your meeting? Amara bent down, kissed his forehead, and whispered. It was the beginning of something good. She tucked him in, turned off the light, and stood in the doorway for a moment longer than usual. Outside, the city glowed, not as a threat, but as a canvas. She had walked through fire, through silence, through judgment and doubt and locked doors, and now she had walked through. Not above, not around, through. And she didn't owe anyone a single explanation for it. She stood in the warm light of her own home, where her son was safe, where her name meant something, where she no longer had to fight for a place because she had built one. Fade to black.